person. How would you decide?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. This is Kent with Bent number 167, done 2016. Bent, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. You know, I got a video edited and rendered and uploaded today. Yeah,
Nice.
I actually have a second video that I need to upload over on Top Hats Off, but that's a thing I can do later. So
Nice.
yeah, it's been pretty good. I have the script for the next video, I don't know, about halfway done. So, you know, good progress. Good stuff.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we are here not so much to talk about what's going on the channel, and more to talk about what's going on in that addled brain of Kent Hovind. I would say drug addled, but I actually don't think he takes a lot of drugs. He just seems like he should be taking a lot of drugs. Like, it would explain a lot, even though I don't think he does. So
That's pretty fun.
thanks.
Yeah.
So I hope everyone in chat is doing well. No, so normally this would be the Matt with Maddie. Maddie couldn't make it, so we're doing a Kent with Bent. In case you're wondering what's going on, why is there a Kent with Bent today? Although, you know, I realize that most people never keep track of things that happen on the whatevereth day, like whatevereth Tuesday or whatever of the month. So it's also possible that a very wide swath of the audience is just like, I don't know which one this would have been anyway, which is fine. Because you know what? You don't need to take up a huge amount of your brain power with figuring out my schedule. That's for me to worry about, not for you guys to worry about. So, we are here. We do play a drinking game with this. If you are new, first, if you're new, welcome. Second, yeah, we do play a drinking game. And before we actually go into the rules, I want to say first, you absolutely do not have to play along at all or play along with alcohol if you don't want to. If you want to play along and you want to play along with juice or tea or coffee or soda or water or, I don't know, eating potato chips, whatever you want, right? It's the drinking rules are just here for fun. I'm going to be drinking a beer. Ben, what are you drinking?
Mountain Dew Baja Blast.
There you go. Let's see. So, yeah, and if you do decide to play along, though, please make sure that you play safely. If you're using some kind of intoxicating substance, know your limit, pace yourself, don't afterwards go out and, like, drive a car, operate heavy machinery, fly an airplane, text your ex, create a portal between dimensions, especially if it's that dimension to, like, the weird giant, the people with the weird giant jawed penises. That dimension is right out. Don't go there. It was a thing in one of the VHS movies. Don't do it. So yeah. And anyway, let's get into the drinking rules. So first of all, we will take a drink anytime Kent Hovind says something that's just so stupid we kind of need to cool our brains down, and that happens pretty frequently. But if he actually gets something correct that's factually accurate, and it's actually something that he comes up with out of his own brain, and he says it at us, and he's not just reading off of something else, we take a drink for Kent getting it right, because that doesn't happen that much, so we like to celebrate when it does. We'll also take a drink anytime Kent tells a joke that doesn't land, or tells a story that didn't happen. Now, with the story, that's a little bit subjective. It's going to be up to us, but if it feels like the kind of thing that should have been on, like, you know, r/that happened, then yeah, we're going to take a drink. And if it seems like the kind of story where it should have ended with and then everyone clapped, yeah, we're going to take a drink for that. So he does tell a few whoppers like that, where it's just like, is that really what happened, Kent? Because, like, I'm sure there's a kernel of truth to this. Like, he has a story about, like, this Berkeley professor who apparently knows literally nothing about anything, that Kent schools intellectually. And, like, I'll bet at some point he was on an airplane with a professor and he found out that was that guy's job. And then he had, like, a quick word or two about creation or something. And then that was it. That's probably the actual truth behind that story. So we'll also take a drink if Kent Hovind mentions that political party from the Germans back in, like, the 1930s into the 1940s. Those guys. Now, this is not the Godwin's Law rule, right? Because Godwin's Law requires that you call the person you're talking to and arguing with a member of that group, which means you just lost the debate if you do that. But because this isn't a debate, and we don't really care if he's calling anyone in particular a member of that group, he just has to mention them. So while it's easy to think of it as the Godwin's Law drink trigger, it's not technically that. We will all take a drink if Kent Hovind manages to confuse what we can learn from just the specimen Lucy of Australopithecus afarensis with what we can know about any wider taxon to which she belongs, whether that be her species, her genus, subfamily, tribe, whatever, right? So if he says something like, we don't know if Lucy could walk upright because we don't have her feet. Well, okay, cool, but she was an Australopithecus afarensis, and we have other Australopithecus afarensis feet, so we do know what her feet look like. So, yeah. Also, Goop23 for $2 says, how do you know it didn't happen? Were you there? No, like I said, it's subjective. And yes, I do appreciate the Ken Ham reference. So, and let's see. I just lost my train of thought. Gosh darn it, Goop23. Where was I? Oh, right, we were just doing ad hominid. So we call that ad hominid. We only get one of those per stream, because once it happened once, it tends to just kind of keep happening. And I don't want to just chug this entire beer because Ken keeps doing it. Although lately he's been talking about geology, so I don't think it'll come up. But anyway, also we have a drink trigger called Trojan Source. If Kent cites a source and we look up that source, and not only does that source fail to support his contention, but actively contradicts it, that's a Trojan source. Now, this is similar to the first law of Flurf, if you're familiar with MC Toon's laws of Flurf, which says that Flurf citations that are not to Flurf sources always contradict the Flurf claim. The first law of creationism, if you can call it that, is weaker, which is to say, young Earth creationist citations to non-young Earth creationist sources never support the claim, but they do not always directly contradict the claim. So, a little weaker, but it does seem to hold up. So let's see. We will also take a drink if either Bent or I can predict what Kent is going to be talking about next when it's not very clear. We will also take a drink. Actually, which ones am I missing that Kent can trigger? I feel like I covered all of them.
That Kent triggers? I think you got them all.
Okay, well then I will move on to the ones that you guys can trigger. So you guys can trigger us to drink by super chatting or memberships, milestone chatting, anything to the effect that AIG or a bag of dicks. We actually have a special emoji just for that in case you want to make it easier on yourself. We will also take a drink if you super chat or membership milestone chat anything with any of our kaiju emojis, which you do have to be a member for. So that's Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah. We will also take a drink if Mothra or Godzilla come by audibly, which can happen sort of semi-randomly. I guess it's not technically random, but there's no easy way for me to predict it. So, like, it's approximately random, I suppose. But then again, randomness is a really hard thing to achieve in this world, so, like, who cares? We will also take a drink for every membership gifted. So, if you want to make us take 5 drinks right in a row, give 5 memberships. That goes until we have about 50 to go, in which case I'm just going to increment the counter by 50, and then I will just finish what the drink I have now and grab another one. So yeah, that is one of the quickest ways to get us a drink, is to just gift a bunch of memberships. Because, yeah, every single one is a drink trigger. And let's see, I will also take a drink if I screw up the production. So, for instance, if I forget to unmute after a break, or if I accidentally mute Bent, or if I forget to increment the drink counter, or something like that, then we will take a drink for Dapper as a professional. Now, if it's actually something that's beyond my control, like a power outage like we had earlier today, or the internet goes out, or YouTube HQ blows up, or war were declared, then, yeah, that's not a Dapper as a professional drink. That's just unfortunate circumstances. So, I think I've covered all of them.
You have.
Excellent. See, I try to remember them off the top of my head, and Bent actually has a list like a smart person. For me, it's sort of like a game where I'm like, can I actually remember all of them? And I usually do pretty well.
I have a list in a notepad file.
Hey, Notepad is a great program, and I will hear no negative things about Notepad. In fact, actually, the Windows 11 version even has spell checker, and it automatically wraps text without you hitting enter.
Nice.
So yeah, it's actually pretty nice in Windows 11. It's one of the nicest things about Windows 11. And also it has tabs. You can open up multiple Notepad documents in different tabs. So like, I'm actually a pretty big fan of the Windows 11 Notepad. overall, Windows 11, I'm like, like, I don't have huge complaints and I don't have like huge praise, but like the notepad, big improvement. All right, we have a few more super chats. Kent, the bacteria kind Halstead says, I was able to collect 50 moles of gemules for tonight's Darwinism ceremony. Gemules. Good old Darwin. Hey, you know what? He didn't know any better. It was as good a guess as any other. Ben, do you know about gemules?
I do not.
So Darwin thought that the way that inheritance worked was that the parts of your bodies would give off these particles that he called gemules, and they carried like the essence of that body part into the the developing embryo, so that it would know how to build an arm because it got the gemules from your arm, and it would know how to build a head because it got the gemules from your head, and so on. It turns out that's not how it works.
Oh,
But like, I mean, if you didn't know anything about DNA and like, you know, weren't familiar with the works of Gregor Mendel and whatnot, not the worst idea. It's at least a plausible thing to look into, right? Anyway, Lieutenant Matt the Navigator for $10 says, and it came to pass that Kenta spake unto Bob, and an English lit professor, and his stupidity so wounded his brain that he sought solace in the words of a vomit bag, and Kentus crows about it to this day. And then Naramda puts skip to the Dapper Dinosaur membership. So thank you very much. We will add one to the counter there and take a drink. Now, before we really get into it, I do want to say thank you very much to Bob Knob. Bob Knob gifted me a rulebook for the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. It is the Cults of Cthulhu, which has been on my wish list for, I think, a couple years. He also gifted me the Nyarlathotep dice set for Call of Cthulhu, which is just a dice set. I mean, you can use it for anything, because it turns out that dice are pretty generic. You can use them for most games. But it's a really fun dice set with a nice red and black color scheme and like little tentacly motifs and whatnot around the numbers. So, yeah, it's in my... I have 2 bags of dice. One is the bag that's like, these are the dice I really like. The other one is just like, this is my bulk bag of dice for when I need bulk dice, which sometimes I do. Because, you know, role-playing games. So yes, special thank you to Bob Knob. Also, people might not know this, but the microphone I'm using right now was also a gift from Bob Knob. So
very nice.
Bob Knob is a big, mostly silent supporter, right? Like, a lot of his support goes on behind the scenes, and so I want to say thank you very much to Bob Knob, because, I mean, virtually every video I put out on this channel has used the microphone he bought me as a gift right after I started really working on the channel. So, like, yeah, big part of the thing. Zerolon, who's been a member for 19 months, says, I like using proprietary dice in the wrong game. Actually, I was thinking about making some proprietary dice with my 3D printer for a TTRPG, because I've been reading the Wrath and Glory rulebook, and basically, on most dice, a roll of 1, 2, and 3 are the same, and a roll of 4 or 5 in the same, and a roll of 6 is just a little bit extra good. And I was like, you know, that could just be like its own special die, right? Because like 5 and 6 count as 1, and 6 counts as 2. So you could just have 3 blank sides, 2 sides with a 1, and 1 side with a 2. That'd be easier to read. So I was thinking I might make those. But anyway, that is not actually what we're here to talk about. Instead, we're here to talk about Kent Hovind. And Kent was most recently telling us about how he thinks that orogenies are also tied to subsidence events on the coasts of continents, in that any orogeny will apparently cause a subsidence that causes part of the continental crust to sink into the ocean. And his evidence for this is that some, but not all mountains, run roughly parallel to coastline. Which is true. But it's a little bit more complicated than he thinks it is. So we're going to continue with that. We only actually have a few minutes left of this video of Kent's, but that's okay because I have the next one already downloaded. Now, I didn't notice this when I downloaded it, but it's actually pretty quiet. So I'm going to have to turn it up all the way, and even then it might be a little bit quiet. I might have to like lower bent and raise up the captured volume. I'm not sure what we're going to do there. But just a heads up, and I think what I'm going to try to do is drop that audio into my audio editing software and like fiddle with it a little bit to improve the quality and like normalize it so it has a normal range of volume instead of a ridiculously low range. So Hey, normalize your audio, people. Just do it. Stop not doing it. Right? Bent knows what I'm talking about here.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Here's Kent telling us about how Florida has a very shallow sloped continental coast crust thing, but California doesn't, I guess, for some reason, because that's important. Lieutenant Matt the Navigator for $2 says, just don't ask Roger how new continents are born. I mean, the thing is, I know what Roger would say. He says that continents are just literally the petrified corpses of gigantic creatures, roughly the size of continents. So, like, yeah, it's absolutely absurd. But hey, here's Kent.
A mile before it gets over your head. California, how far do you walk out before it's over your head?
That's going to depend on the beach. I've been to beaches in California. They don't all have the same slope, but I guess whatever. Olivia Williams for 5 Beaverbuck says, this reminds me Werewolf the Apocalypse had a moon dice. Yeah, and then there's a Ghidorah, and we'll take a drink for that. Yeah, fun special dice are cool. Even in games that don't use proprietary dice most of the time, like, you can just make them proprietary if the dice roll is anything other than just using the numerical value. So, that's why I was thinking Wrath and Glory special dice could work, because you don't actually use the numerical value. They give you the numerical values and what they correspond to, so you can use any generic d6. But, like, what if I want something special? What if I want to paint and prime and all that my own special dice? And I might.
About 40 feet, yeah. Go out about 1 mile and drop a string with a rock on it down, see how deep it is. Real deep.
Is that string going to be marked out for fathoms? Because, you know, that's the traditional way of measuring how deep the sea is. It's usually a chain, right? But you have different lengths that are marked for 1 fathom, 2 fathoms, 3 fathoms. And then once the chain goes slack, you know that you've reached the bottom with whatever weight you had on it. And so you pull it up until it's just taut again. And you see how many fathoms deep. So, I mean, I'll give Kent this. He is roughly approximating the right way to measure the depth of the ocean in, like, you know, traditional physical manner. Nowadays, you know, we use like sonar and maps and whatnot, but like, it's good to know how to do it the old-fashioned way.
Go out about 10 miles and drop a string down. And it's unreal. It's lots deeper. There's a trench out there. Okay.
Technically, he's right. There is a trench west of California. Good job, Ken. He doesn't know what that means. He thinks that it's actually the result of the North American plate, like, sinking down after the Rockies rose up, whereas it's actually the cause of the Rockies rising up because it's the Pacific plate, well, and also a previous plate that's now basically just completely gone. But anyway, sinking under the crust and then melting and then pushing up the mountains. So, you know, Kent has, like, the causality wrong, but, like, they are connected. He is right about that. Admiral Snappy Turtle says, I wish RageBot would show up to Dapper Dinosaur live streams more often. I mean, RageBot is welcome. RageBot shows up to a lot of Top Hats op streams. But that's, I think, partly because Craig McNeil's there.
Yeah, who cares?
Good question, Kent.
All over the earth, we find these bent rock layers.
Mm-hmm.
You don't bend rocks very far.
Actually, it depends, right? So some rocks, all rocks have varying amounts of ductility, right? It's usually pretty low. However, ductility can be increased, just like with metals, by temperature and pressure. Increase temperature or pressure, or both, and you can increase ductility. And the thing is, we've known experimentally that you can get rocks to do 180-degree bends like this with enough pressure and enough heat. And we've known that experimentally for about a century. Like, the experiments that first defined, like, what we now have in geology for things like confinement pressure and temperature increases to ductility in solid rock, those were experimentally worked out in the 1930s. So, like, this isn't a new thing. This isn't something we're struggling to figure out. And if the rocks, in fact, exceeded, like, the bending actually exceeds the ductility amount that they have, you can actually tell, because then there will be brittle fractures. And here's a fun thing. In a paper arguing that a rock formation that was wildly bent like this didn't have stress fractures, therefore had to be formed while the sediment was still unlithified, Andrew Snelling, in his paper about this, included a picture of the rock formation in question, which was weirdly full of people. And it turns out, if you look at that same rock formation in pictures from the USGS, that's the United States Geological Survey, the places where the people were standing are exactly where the brittle fractures were that he said weren't in the rock. So, yeah, creationists know that they're lying about this. At least some of them do. There's also the case that if these sediments were formed unlithified, which means they're not actually rock yet, they're still loose sediment, the boundary between the layers would be mixed, and it would generally be a filmy layer, as the different like cementing agents kind of mix together. That's largely absent. So we know for a fact that most of these bent layers were not bent while the sediment was still still unlithified.
They break. But these
Yeah, they break unless you have enough pressure and heat, in which case they don't. Experimentally verified for nearly a century.
rock, this one is in West Virginia. You can see the interstate highway was cut across here. This photograph taken showing this huge layers of rock are bent over interstate, whatever that is, going up through West Virginia. Well, they had to bend while they were soft.
No, they didn't. Let's just take a drink. In fact, generally speaking, we can tell if they bent while they were soft. And here's a fun one, right? So, generally, bones don't plastically deform very well, which you might know if you've ever broken a bone. Like, you ever break a bone there, Bent?
No,
Really?
really.
You've never broken a bone?
I've subluxated my tailbone, but it's not broken technically.
Weird.
I know, right?
One of these days we should fix that.
No,
I'll just break a little minor bone.
no, that's okay.
Like,
Pass.
okay, how much are you really using, like, your left ulna?
All the time.
Come on.
I use it every day.
Okay, what about, like, I don't know, like the distal phalange on, like, digit 5 on your left foot?
I'm using it right now.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
I don't believe this at all.
Okay.
Okay, fine. Okay, we won't fix that intentionally.
All right, good.
But anyway, for those of you who have broken bones, you might have noticed that at certain points, your bones just break. But what if you found in a bent rock layer a smoothly plastically deformed fossil skull, where the deformation of the skull actually matched the deformation of the rock layer? That would have to mean that the skull bent and didn't break. And that's a thing that's happened. There was famously a Stegosaurus skull found in a bent rock layer that itself was bent. So, like, we know that it had to happen to the solid skull, because otherwise it would have cracked. And it didn't. So, yeah. Turns out, we can test this in multiple ways. And no, it doesn't actually have to break if it's under enough pressure and it's hot enough. And we actually have whole diagrams for this. They're sort of like phase diagrams. I don't know if you've ever seen phase diagrams. I know Bent has.
A long time ago, yeah.
But they're kind of like that, where you have like pressure and heat and wet, and like the level of bendability in the rock varies with pressure and heat. So, which are also the two axes on a phase diagram.
My humble opinion.
Well, your humble opinion is dumb, and you never looked into it, Kent. That's the thing, right? Like, there are things that we know and you can look into, and your opinion on that matter doesn't matter. Roshina, the facticity of cheese keller for 199 says, rocks don't bent because was warmer in grounds? That's what it says. Are you okay, Roshina?
I didn't do it.
Roshina, blink twice if you're being held hostage. Oh wait, that's not going to work. Because I can't see anyone's face except for Bent's and Kent's. And I guess my own. But I'm weirdly still.
If they were bent while they were hard, there would be cracks in the rock which do not exist.
I mean, actually, many of these bent layers do in fact have some cracks. But also, again, it depends on the actual heat and pressure history of the rock.
If I took 50 layers of clay and bent them and then baked it, no problem.
Well, I mean, it depends on exactly what you're doing. But it wouldn't be a problem, but also we'd be able to tell that it was unlithified when you bent it.
It would hold that shape. But if I put 50 layers of clay and baked it and then bent it, it wouldn't bend. Well, I could shatter it.
But what if you bent it under thousands of kilograms per square inch of pressure and hundreds of degrees Celsius? That might change. Kent, the bacteria kind Halstead for $4.99 says, Bent's skeleton is stronger than every argument Kent has ever made. That's probably true. Good job, Bent.
I did it.
Way to not have, like, osteoporosis or anything that you know of.
That I know of.
Better drink more milk.
Yay.
Yeah. Unless
Milk.
you want osteoporosis.
No, thank you.
Yeah. I hear it sucks.
It does, from what I've been told.
I think one of my grandmothers had it a little bit. Like, it wasn't a severe case, but anyway.
My mom has it.
Yeah, it's not a good time.
Mm-mm.
But there'd be cracks, but they're not there. So here they are telling the kids each of these layers is a different age. Well, then the bottom one's going to be hard before the next one gets on top.
Well, first, that's what she said. Second, they're actually all going to end up being hard before they're bent in most cases.
Bent rock layers are proof positive the layers were formed quickly and bent before any of them had time to harden.
Just drink.
That's an actual picture in San Juan Capistrano, California. Where was that from you guys when you lived out there? San Juan? So
I'm actually not even sure that that's actually part of the rock, because this looks like a bunch of sediment that has fallen, like, eroded out recently. So I'm not super confident that's actually rock layers and not just patterns in the sediment. So, like, I don't know. Maybe if anyone can look this up, like maybe like reverse image search it or anything, I would be interested, because I mean it's a low quality picture on a low quality VHS that was then ripped to like a super tiny file digitally. So like I don't trust that I can recognize what's going on super accurately, but to me this looks like a bunch of sediment that ended up settling out in weird patterns. But like I could very well be wrong.
in California. That's right. I preached in Temecula. It's not too far from there. Okay. As the rock layers are bending, as the mountains are lifting up, this is going to exert pressure. Now, if you take limestone and squeeze it real hard, it changes to marble. Different types of stone. There are 3 types of stone or rock in the world, not counting fossils. Okay. There is sedimentary rock,
True.
which
Take a
is
drink.
sediment that settled out. There is metamorphic rock. Metamorphic means it's been changed by heat and pressure.
True. Take another drink.
You get pressure and heat, it'll change it to something else. Marble, used for tombstones, and
Is that like real dense rock then? Because of the heat
it changes the structure of the molecules. They line up differently. Then you have igneous rock. Igneous comes from a Latin word ignite. What kind of rock would be igneous? Volcanic rock, lava, stuff like
Hey,
that.
you got that right
Igneous
too.
rock.
Take a drink.
Those are the 3 basic categories of rocks: sedimentary, igneous, and metamorphic.
Also, I did have to look up off the top the degree to which he was right about marble, because I don't remember off the top of my head exactly how marble is made, but it is in fact made of calcite type minerals that are metamorphosed. So yeah, he's basically right. So Kent's doing pretty well here at the end of this video, of which there's less than a minute remaining.
Where are you most likely to find fossils? Sedimentary. You wouldn't find it in igneous rock.
Actually, you might. So tuff is a kind of igneous rock that falls as sediment and can and does preserve fossils. So tuff is lithified volcanic ash. And so as tuff goes up into the air primarily, or sometimes underwater, it will settle back down. And so we get things like subaerial tuff layers. There is actually ashfall beds is a famous fossil. It's a Cenozoic fossil bed in North America. So it's not going to have things that most young Earth creationists are going to consider to be like flood-caused fossils, but it preserves a big herd of rhinos, which, hey, fun fact, rhinos and horses actually evolved in North America before spreading into Eurasia. So, But yeah, it preserves a bunch of primitive, or well, I should say basal rhinos in volcanic ash. And the volcanic ash can conveniently actually be directly tested for with radiometric dating. My Finished Journey for 222 says, is San Juan Capistrano where cappuccino is from? No, it is not. So Cappuccino, I believe, is actually named after the monks, the Capuchin monks. And the monkeys, the Capuchin monkeys, are also named after the monks because apparently their markings look kind of like a Capuchin monk's habit, like their robes. So, but I actually don't know the exact origin of cappuccino, other than that, as far as I can tell, it's named after the order of Catholic monks, which also means it's presumably Italian in origin. But like, I am not a coffee historian. I do know that for a while, the Catholic Church was pretty suspicious of coffee because it seemed like it made like animals that ate coffee cherries started acting really weird, and they were like, "Ah, it's probably Satan. That's a Satan tree right there." But then monks noticed, like, "Oh, hey, if I also eat this, I can stay up all night for prayers." Which is, you know, like your goal as a monk, right? What else do you have to do besides stay up all night for prayers? Actually, there are a few other answers, some of which are even not allowed, but happen anyway. But yeah, like then it was like, oh, well, okay, maybe it's not a Satan tree. Maybe it's an okay tree if it helps you pray, because obviously nothing that helps you pray can be evil. Erosion, the Bacticity of Cheese, got it for $4.99, says, it comes from the Latin word ignis, which means fire, not the Latin word ignite. Yeah, that's true. I wasn't going to focus on it because, like, he's roughly right about the etymology, and it's not really an etymology show, but no, you are right. He is incorrect about that. It's just that ignite and igneous have a common origin, because ignite is also obviously from ignis. So, yeah. Anyway, here we go.
If there was anything in there, it got melted and recycled.
Again, it depends. Tough, not the case. If it's actual like basalt or like gabbro or something, well then yeah, sure. Probably you're not going to have any organic material preserved in that. But tough, absolutely. Tough is actually pretty. It's pretty common to find fossils in tough.
Okay. So, after the flood, I believe the oceans were small.
Okay, so Julian Solid Waves Ren says the only result I got on the image is a website that says from a Kenthoven presentation. Great. So what that probably means is that this is a picture that Kenthoven took himself, which I'm not faulting him for. I'm just saying I can't tell what's going on because of the low quality. I'm sure that it would be easier if it were a higher quality. I don't know if that means that he's telling the truth about it, but like, I can't really fault him for the fact that this was recorded when it was, and then went through the ridiculous chain to get to me that it went through, because Kent didn't choose any of that. So, like, you know, I'm going to be reasonably fair to the guy. Even though, I mean, gigantic piece of crap. But still, you can be fair to crap.
Smaller than they are today.
True.
Continents were bigger, which means you could walk anywhere in the world.
Where is he getting the concept? Oh, right, because he thinks that every orogeny is also a subsidence of some part of the continent, and therefore he thinks that every time mountains go up, that what that means is that the total area of the continent goes down, even though the surface area might go up. But like the total like 2D area, if you're just measuring how much of the globe it takes out, will go down. Which isn't how this works, because it's actually just not the case that orogenies, which are mountain building events, require subsidence elsewhere. They just don't. Continents can get bigger. They just can. Now that means that there's going to be more water that they're displacing, which does mean that other places might shrink a little bit if a continent gets significantly bigger. But like, yeah, there's no rule that says continents get smaller every time there's a mountain building event. That's not how it works. In fact, the orogeny that he was most recently talking about, which caused the Rockies, that almost certainly didn't reduce the area of North America at all. That was just new rock forming as it burst up through the ground. And the rock that was supplying that reservoir of new rock to be formed was coming from the Pacific plate, not the North American plate. Let's see. Remember when, so Hypesize says, remember when Kent used to claim to possess a giant 18-inch cockroach fossil? Good times. I do remember that. I don't know whatever became of that. Because, like, I'm not aware of any 18-inch, like, fossil cockroaches, but then again, I mean, I'm not like a paleoentomologist, so maybe I wouldn't. I do know that he thinks that isopods are trilobites, which is incredibly dumb. In order to do that, you just have to know nothing about either crustacean or trilobite anatomy. Which, I mean, given how much we know he knows about dinosaur anatomy, he probably doesn't know anything about that. But at that point, though, I feel like maybe you should not make wild claims about things that you don't know anything about. Well, I'm not going around here giving you guys, like, car repair advice. Because I don't know anything about that. I mean, I guess I know something, but not nearly enough to give you advice. That's why Bent isn't out here giving financial advice. Also, it's illegal. Bent, don't do that. Here's my financial advice. Get financial advice from a real financial planner. Boom. It's like my legal advice. Twofold. Don't talk to cops, get a lawyer. Yeah. And really, don't talk to cops. There's not really a good reason to talk to cops. Let's see, Goop23 for $5 says, and every time mountains kiss, they swear they could fly. And then Roshan Effecticity of Cheese Keller for $1.99 says, whenever Dap says erogeny, I think erogeny with an E. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's not what I mean, but you're welcome to think that. All right. I mean, if I wasn't okay with you doing that, then it would have been hypocritical of me, because I just recently had a that's what she said moment when Kent was talking about the one on bottom getting hard before the next one gets on top, and I was like, oh, come on, Kent. You teed that one right up for me. Like, I don't think he's ever had a more perfect that's what she said moments on the show.
We'll get into that next week. What happened after the flood? Why do we have a continental shelf?
It's the edge of the granite bit. That's it. But whatever, who cares?
Kind of interesting. How did they get to Australia?
Who? The animals?
We'll cover that next week. All that stuff on the...
There was no antecedent for they. I'm meeting him way more than halfway and assuming that he means, like, the Australian animals. And actually, the question isn't so much how did the animals get there, it's why did only those ones get there? Why aren't there tigers? That's the real big question, right? Like, what is it about Australia that kept out all the canids until humans introduced dingoes, and all the thalids until humans introduced, Felis catus domesticus? Oh wait, no, Felis sylvestris catus. That's what it is. I can remember. Like, what kept out basically all the placental mammals except for like one species of rat and a few species of bat? Why? What about Australia was special? Because it's actually not that hard to figure out how to get a kangaroo from, like, the Middle East to Australia. Like, they can move. It's a little bit harder for things like koalas and wombats and whatnot. But, like, the real big question is if they could get there, why didn't anything else? And I don't think he's going to even realize that that's a question he should answer.
What was it like after the flood, and continue with the Hovind theory, and get into about Mount St. Helens and what it did in Washington State, showing what one catastrophe can do in a hurry. Right? See you next week.
Thank you. Right? It blew up. But hey, I just say we got 76 people watching, and we got no one we got less than half of you having hit like. We only got 37 likes. So, once again, I hate to say it, but I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve, so get on it. Hit that like button. But hey, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, Bent, immediately, but I'm going to do this and see what happens.
Okay.
Whoops. I hit the wrong button there. Here we go. Can you still see it?
I see it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Welcome to class number 4 of our CSE 104. And we're going to take up where we left off last week, talking about the flood. What effects did this cause on the Earth? We mentioned how that probably right after the flood was over, the oceans were actually smaller. This would expose enormous amounts of land that currently are underwater, called the continental shelf. I want you to look here at the map. Between England and the United States, or between England and Europe, is the English Channel. It's about
Generally, people think of England as part of Europe, and also what's being pictured there isn't England per se, it's the British Isles, which ironically is labeled on the map, whereas England isn't. So I'm going to take a drink. Also, Europe is labeled elsewhere, but like, sure, whatever. So yeah, that's fun. Just, this is England. Do Americans not know the difference between, like, England, Great Britain, the United Kingdom, the British Isles? Like, do you guys not?
I've read it multiple times. I never remember.
Okay, so you see that biggish island that's going north to south?
Hmm.
That's Great Britain. That whole island is Great Britain. The one to the west of that is Ireland. Not the same island.
Correct.
There's another island there in the middle. It's like the Isle of Man, whatnot, right? On Great Britain, you can find England, Scotland, and Wales, which are each different kingdoms within the United Kingdom. Okay, there's also Cornwall in there, but it was conquered by England so long ago that it no longer counts as a separate kingdom. But Cornish is a language. It's a Celtic language. Anyway, the United Kingdom includes those kingdoms as well as Northern Ireland, but there's also a whole bunch of other protectorates, like the Isle of Man and Guernsey Islands and whatnot, that are also, like, not one of the kingdoms, but, like, they're still under the UK government. The British Isles is that whole archipelago, including the Hebrides, which you can see northeast of Scotland. So, like, actually, I'm not sure if the Hebrides are actually part of the British Isles. Don't quote me on that. But, like, yeah, that's how the breakup is, right? It's a little complicated, but it's not that complicated. So, the British Isles includes Ireland, as well as Great Britain, and the various other islands there, like the Isle of Man. The UK is a country that includes all of Great Britain and a few other British Isles, but not all of Ireland. And Great Britain is that landmass that composes most of the main landmass of the UK. It's that single island that you can see there. So, yeah, in case anyone is wondering about all that, that's the breakdown there. So, like, I keep hearing people, especially Americans, say silly things like, oh, that guy lives in Scotland, in England. Like, nope, can't do that. That's like living in Texas, in California. It doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, don't do that.
30 miles wide, and yet it's only about 150 feet deep, I believe, at the deepest point.
Okay.
150 feet out of 30 miles, realize that's nothing. So
Oh, wait. I missed a super chat. Kerry Bronson for $5 says, AIG is a bag of 18-inch cockroach fossils. I'll take a drink for that, even though technically it doesn't meet the requirements. But you know what? I'm thirsty and generous. Oh, interesting. My Unfinished Journey says, for what it's worth, Richard Dawkins' mom was one of the last known Cornish speakers. Interesting. I assume you mean native Cornish speakers, because you can still learn Cornish. That is interesting.
sometimes look at the maps and say, wow, that's blue, therefore that's water. Yeah, that might be true, but that doesn't mean it's very deep water. Sometimes it's...
Is that a question that did people not know that? In a map where the water is all the same color, you can't tell how deep it is? I feel like people already know that, but maybe Kent doesn't. Maybe Kent was surprised by that when he learned that.
Yeah, maybe.
It's very, very shallow. In between Alaska and Russia here, you can see underwater land bridge that's just absolutely enormous.
An underwater land bridge. You see what the problem is there?
It's underwater.
Yeah, so it's not land.
Yeah.
So it's not an underwater land bridge. It's like it's like saying you've got raw fried potatoes. You can't. Either they're raw or they're fried. They can't be both. Those are contradictory statements. I'm taking 2 drinks for underwater land bridge. I can't. You could say underwater former land bridge. You could say now flooded land bridge. Oh my god.
And all you'd have to do is freeze a bunch of the water and stick it on the poles as huge ice caps. If the ice caps were larger, the oceans would be smaller.
It's true. I'll take a drink. Good job, Kent.
Obviously. If the oceans are smaller, then the land masses are not only bigger, they're all connected.
No, actually, they're not all connected, although more of them are, right? But it turns out that you would have to freeze far more of the ocean than we have ever seen any evidence of having been frozen in order to connect, say, Australia to Southeast Asia. And the reason for that is because there is, in fact, a trench on the northwest side of Australia in the ocean, which is very deep. So deep that you would have to freeze almost all of the water in the oceans to the poles in order to expose it, and then you would still have a giant canyon to cross. So it is not true. And also, none of that would bridge to Antarctica, and we have fossils from what Kent thinks of as post-flood Antarctica. So how did that happen? Because no amount of freezing the ice is going to explain how you got a thriving ecosystem on Antarctica, because first, we have no reason to think the water level has ever been low enough to connect Antarctica to the other continents. And second, if what you're relying on to get animals to Antarctica is land bridges, that means that Antarctica has to be way colder than it is now. And already, it's way too cold for a thriving ecosystem full of things like forests and animals. So, like, that doesn't help a whole lot. When did those animals exist? Dutch, the Place of Hostilities Tunicate for $2 says, be easy on Kent. Words are hard, Godzilla. And no, I will not be easy on Kent. And here's the reason. Convicted spouse abuser. I will be fair to Kent, but I will not be giving him any benefit of the doubt. So, like, if there's something that I couldn't blame anyone for, okay, fine. I'll give him a pass on that. Right? Like this crappy picture quality. That's not his fault. He wasn't in charge of this upload, and it was probably filmed on VHS and then copied multiple times until it got to whoever ripped it to DVD, and then that person probably uploaded a low-quality DVD video to YouTube. I'm not going to blame him for that. He's not in charge of any of that process. But when it comes to saying underwater land bridge, I will absolutely call him on that.
This shows where the land bridge would be if the ocean levels were lower a little bit. So we have...
It's a lot of it, right? Like, it's true that those parts of the ocean are shallow, but they're still, in many cases, hundreds of feet deep. And chances are that the Bering Land Bridge did not actually expose the entire continental shelf, right? That was probably never the case. We know that there was a land bridge between what's now Russia and what's now Alaska there. Of course, you know, for a while Alaska was also part of Russia, but whatever. And so, like, you don't actually need to lower the water level very much to make those two land masses connect there. So, which actually someone asked me the other day, because I think it was one of the Russian Orthodox Church derived churches in North America recently declared an Alaskan woman from like the 18-something or others as a saint. And someone's like, could she see Russia from her house? Which is, you know, playing on the whole Palin thing. And then it was like, actually probably, because at the time I think Alaska was still part of Russia. So yeah, probably she could see Russia from her door because she was standing on Russia. So, you know. But also apparently, according to the article that I read, the first North American woman to become a saint in any Eastern Orthodox church. So, congrats, I guess. Good job, everybody. We did it. By we, I think I mean the Orthodox Church in America. So, yay!
Two parts to the ocean, basically, or it depends how you want to count it, but we have the continental shelf, then we have the continental rise, and then the deep part called the abyss. Florida was probably about 1,000 miles wide. If you lowered the water just...
Okay, with Florida, that might actually be plausible, because Kent is right that the water surrounding Florida is very shallow. And so even a very small dip in ocean levels would dramatically increase the size of Florida, at least today. So, like, that might work out.
A few hundred feet, you can almost walk to Cuba. And then from Cuba, you can hop over the creek and go to Mexico.
That's a really weird way to get to Mexico, but sure, whatever. Who cares? I mean, Mexico's already connected to the rest of continental North America, so, like, you know, be a weird way to do it, but sure.
And that ditch between Cuba.
That was there's no reason to think that was ever the old beach line. Kent, does Kent think that the continental shelf was formed by the shoreline? Like, what does Kent think this is, other than a like? Okay, I'm taking a drink, and I'm going to try to figure out what he thinks is going on here. Okay. So, any amount that you lower the ocean level, right, is going to expand the size of the above water portion of the North American plate, which is what we're looking at here, right? Okay. But if you were to extend that down to just exactly where the continental shelf ends and the continental rise begins, that's just a coincidental elevation, right? Like, there's nothing special about that. So what could explain him thinking that this is the actual definite shoreline from before the flood? Like, what process does he think caused the continents, like the continental shelf, to stop there at the beach? So, like, every single beach in the world was just a cliff where the ocean started. Why? I'm really struggling to think of a mechanism that he could explain this by. I don't think he's going to give us a mechanism. I think he's just going to say, look, it's an obvious visual change in the topography, therefore it was the coastline. And I cannot figure out why he thinks that, other than that it would be convenient for him, because then it would connect a lot of land masses. Which, I mean, okay, sure. But yeah, okay, Lieutenant Matt's Navigator has it figured out. Looks like. Yep. No, that is almost certainly all it is. It just looks like. Oh, I hate that that's what it is, but you're so right. It is just looks like. Yeah. Damn.
And Florida may have not existed at all. Let's suppose...
Wait, you just said it was gigantic. Did Florida not exist, or was it gigantic, Kent? What's... I'm taking a drink. You ever seen a landmass so big it stopped existing?
Yeah, right next to that underwater land bridge.
That was good. Jeez.
the oceans were lower after the flood. The Atlantic Ocean is filled in.
I'm sorry, you think that we're going to lower the water enough for the entire Atlantic Ocean to be land, Kent? That would be almost every single drop of water is now locked up in the ice caps. What is happening right now? Like, when it was just like, oh, the water went down to the edge of the continental shelf, I was like, well, that's weird and there's no reason to think that, but like, whatever. But like, the entire Atlantic is above water? It's... Oh my goodness! Like, what's the deepest point of the Atlantic? I don't know off the top of my head. That's not a number or a fact I keep in my head. Let's see. Let's just check. Oh, apparently the Milwaukee Deep. Congrats, Bent. That's a place that you've been to. Yeah. So it's part of the Puerto Rico Trench. And it's the deepest points in the Atlantic Ocean. Let's see, but like, how deep is it though? Okay, here we go. 122 kilometers deep. Kilometers deep. Kent is proposing a drop in the ocean levels of over 100 kilometers here. That's not a thing that ever happened. I'm sorry, Kent. Lieutenant Matt the Navigator for $5 says, maybe the emergence of Florida Man was the true punishment of the flood. You know, the weird thing about the Florida Man thing is that it's actually like an artificial creation of the Florida Sunshine Law, right? So there's this law in Florida that basically requires that things like police reports and arrest records and things like that be public information, which means it's really easy to get like weird sensational stories from Florida to just fill out whatever time or page space you have in your news outlet. So as a result, we get all these stories about Florida man. But the thing is, if you dig into old cases that are now public from other places, you can find just as much crazy stuff. I mean, it doesn't involve as many alligators because most places don't have as many alligators. But like, I mean, there's still all sorts of crazy nonsense. Like I saw a Florida woman held a veterinarian hostage at gunpoint in order to force him to make her dog immortal. But that's the kind of stuff that happens everywhere. It's just it only gets reported on when it's in Florida. Which, you know what? I mean, fair enough, right? Like, who wants their dog to die? If I actually thought that a veterinarian could make my dog immortal, I don't know that I would hold him at gunpoint, but I'd probably do something designed to get him to make my dog immortal. Yeah.
But the Gulf of Mexico may be totally dry. It may be just a low place. Once the water gets high enough to go over the top, then it'll erode that canyon.
Okay, hold on. So he thinks that the continental rise and the actual depths of the ocean were caused by erosion of the continental shelf. But if that whole area were just at the same level as the continental shelf so that it could erode down, where did it erode to if there was no depression? You can't erode lower than the lowest point. What? I'm taking another drink. What? Like, normally, when Ken says something, I can understand how he thinks it's a thing, right? Like, I can understand the process that he thinks happened. It's usually stupid and wouldn't work for a variety of usually somewhat technical reasons. But with this, if the deep part, right, only exists because the continental shelf was eroded away, then it couldn't actually have gone deeper than the continental shelf that was there at the beginning. Because otherwise it wouldn't have had anywhere to go. Because the entire Gulf of Mexico is basically a deposition zone, right? The whole thing is being slowly filled in with sediment. In fact, that Mississippi cone, that's the sediment from the Mississippi. That's what that is. So far from eroding away, the Gulf of Mexico is filling up. How could it have eroded away from the continental shelf? This doesn't make any sense at all. This is just the opposite of how anything works.
So the ditch between Florida and Cuba may actually be an eroded canyon.
How? What water is going to flow through there? Like, it's not like it's a river there.
Underwater canyon. There are some enormous canyons. Look up where Boston is and go south to New York and look out into the
Why not just say, look at where New York is? Whatever, it doesn't matter.
water. You see some huge canyons. The Hudson Canyon. Can you see that on the map there?
Yeah, those are in fact erosional features. But they require that the ocean floor be there and at a lower level than the continental shelf in the first place.
There are underwater canyons that are enormous. Well, how did the Hudson River cause that?
By flowing. Also, do you think Kent knows that there are underwater rivers in the oceans right now that persist as underwater currents hugging the ocean bed as a result of salinity differences that form their own little gullies and canyons? I don't think he knows that, but it's a real thing, right?
Interesting.
Yeah. There are actually saline delineated rivers under the water, right, where the water has different salinities, and so the different salinities can actually cause water to sink down, and that channel of water can actually flow and create river-like systems underwater. You can actually have different ecosystems in the salty river as opposed to the less salty rest of the ocean. So, like, there are underwater rivers, and also as sediment drops out, it's going to drop out more or less vertically, which means that it can itself then wear away underlying rock as it flows down and then falls down things. Because it's not just water that can cause, flow-type erosion. The flow of little bits of rock, which is what sediment is, can also cause that. Roshan of the Facticity of Cheese Keller for $1.99 says, all Continental shelves were beaches once? That's what he seems to think. I mean, yeah, it seems like that's his position, which is really weird. I don't know why he thinks that. I don't know how he thinks that helps him. I don't know how he thinks that's even, like, logically coherent. But, I mean, whatever. And hey, I'm pretty much out of this beer, and it is at the top of the hour, so let's take a quick intermission. While we do that, you guys can get to see the new, trailer for the next Star Trek Endurance game, and I will get myself a fresh new beer. And Lieutenant Matt the Navigator for $5 says, the question, do you think Kent Hovind knows? Can't be safely answered with no. I think you meant can be safely answered with no in almost all cases. And that is correct. Yeah, that's true. I probably should have realized that. You would think that after 167 episodes, nothing would surprise me about how dumb this man can get. But it can. All right, so we will be right back in just a little bit. Hang tight, and I don't know, enjoy the break. Go get yourself a new drink. Go get a snack. Next time on Star Trek Endurance.
Communications officer. No, this is... no. Communications officer. No, this is... Communications officer's log. Stardate 60120.7. The crew seemed on edge for weeks now after our failure to save the colony on Serena 7. I cannot help but feel a little responsible. After all, I was part of the team to shut down and disconnect the tachyon device on the Hamilton. Well, after weeks of routine surveys, the Kongzi has been sent to a Federation space station called Epsilon 19. Just outside the Shackleton Expanse. We are delivering scientific survey equipment. The captain and command crew has been invited to a dinner by the station's commander. I'm going along too. I may not need to eat, but it will give me an opportunity to see more humanoid social interaction in a formal setting. I am looking forward to it. And we are due to arrive at the station in only a few hours.
The crew is in for more than one surprise on board Epsilon 19. An unexpected guest arrives, and shortly after, a brief stop at a space station for deliveries becomes a fight for survival. Did the mysterious guest sabotage the station? Was it a crew member? Or was it even sabotage at all? The crew will have to discover the truth, or risk losing a valuable Federation outpost, and maybe their lives. Watch next time, only on the Top Hats Off channel.
We are back. Thank you very much, everyone. We got a few things to read here. So as a follow-up to Lieutenant Matt the Navigator's $5 super chat that says, the question, do you think Kent knows, can be safely answered with no in almost all cases. Lieutenant Matt the Navigator follows up with, The rest can be answered with F no, and also accurate. And then Lieutenant Bath Navigator gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. So let's update a few things. Take 5 drinks, and then we'll do the quick after the break thing, and then we'll get on with Kent. So here we go. 1. Can actually hit the increment button. Here we go. 2, 3, 4, and 5. Thank you very much. In case you don't know, which I'm sure virtually all of you do, this show is almost entirely supported by viewers like you. I'm like PBS, except I don't get any public funding. I guess besides like the general things that my taxes go towards, like, I don't know, keeping the potholes unfilled, I guess. I don't know what it is. Killing people in other countries, I guess, a big part of it. Oh right, kidnapping people in the United States and disappearing them to gulags. I guess I get that for some of my tax money too now. So yeah, I don't get any of that public funding. So it's almost all directly from you guys. And so if you like what I do, if you want to see it continue on, if you want to see me, have what I would really like to do is to be able to occasionally hire some people on like a, like as sort of like a, like an independent contractor basis, right? Like maybe at some point it would be nice to be able to get a producer who can actually focus on the production side so that I don't have to. So there's fewer dappers of professional moments, higher quality production, stuff like that. Or eventually maybe I'd like to bring on an editor who I can pay to, stitch together videos for me so I can focus on research and scripting and animating and stuff like that. Because I find a lot of the editing to mostly be like a bit of like a mechanistic chore that I just kind of go through. And so like if you want to see any of that stuff happen, sending super chats and stickers and super thanks and buying memberships are great, but also one of the ways that I can help keep a budget going and figure out exactly how much I'm going to have month to month, which is hard doing YouTube, is the Patreon and joining the memberships outside of a gift where you just actually opt to join. Those both start really cheap. The lowest level on Patreon is only $1. On the memberships, it's $1.99. That's per month. On Patreon, you can get a 15% discount if you go annually. They both give you access to the Discord server, which I think is a pretty fun place. They give you early access to my scripted videos. One just came out today. So, if you have access there, feel free to check that out. So, yeah. There's a lot of options for how to help out. If none of those are your thing, like if you don't want to do a monthly or an annual thing, there's a merch store. I did mention earlier that, Bob Knob got me some stuff from my Amazon wishlist. There's that. That is... The real goal there is basically I get a bunch of happy chemicals when people send me things from the wishlist. And it's usually stuff that is going to help me prevent burnout. So if you want me to not burn out, which so far I don't think I've burnt out, but I have come close here and there. And, my fans were quick to urge me to take a break. Maybe don't work on anything for a week or two. And I appreciate it. And that stuff helps with that too. So yeah, that's another way to support. Also, if you want to support me in a non-financial, but still very material way, you can render for me. So the way that I get any of my animations done that I do in Blender is I set up the animation as a blend file. That's the internal file type for Blender scenes, right? And I then send them to a render farm called Sheepit. And I have a certain number of points on Sheepit. And every time someone renders one of my frames, my points go down. And how high in priority my frames are to be assigned to other people is based on how many points I have. So the more points I have, the higher priority my frames are, which means the faster they get rendered. If you want to help me get those points, down in the description, there is a section called How to Render for Me. Follow the link there to the website that will let you download the Sheepit client and then enter in the login credentials that are in that How to Render for Me. And that password that's there is actually a render key that will tell Sheepit, hey, your points should go to my account, but it's not the password to that account, which means you can't go in and delete my projects or delete the account or upload your own projects to my account, things like that. Now, that being said, if you actually did need to upload something to my account, you could probably talk to me, and depending on what it is, I might actually sacrifice some points for you. But that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. And if too many people try to do it, I'll just say no. But, anyway, that's another way you can help out. That will cost you electricity because it will drain your, it'll use up some GPU cycles on your computer most likely. So, be aware of that. That's another way you can help out. It's a really big help. I sometimes come in and I see like 6 or 7 different people rendering for me on Sheepit, and that's always amazing. So that's another way. Anyway, let's get into the rest of this whole Kent thing, because you know what? I've been rambling for long enough.
If the beach line, though, was out a few hundred miles, then the Hudson River would be flowing way out there.
Okay, but Kent, the canyon you showed us was past the shelf. So, like, wouldn't that cause a canyon in the shelf, but not past the shelf, according to your idea that canyons can't form underwater? So that doesn't work. I'm taking another drink. Kent can't even keep his own narrative internally consistent. It's amazing. It's actually kind of like Flat Earth, right? I don't know if you ever noticed, but every single Flat Earth explanation for a phenomenon contradicts some other Flat Earth explanation for a different phenomenon. So they can't be true at the same time. And they just don't notice. They're just like, whatever, that's fine. Kent is the exact same way. He will say something that is completely contradictory to something else he just said previously in the same talk. Doesn't even notice.
And as the river comes up, the old canyon becomes covered up, becomes part of the ocean. And then erosion becomes much more difficult. The Gulf...
Emporia says, luckily for me, electricity is included in rent. Well, in that case, you should always render for me. Do nothing but render for me. No, I'm kidding. You should do other things too.
Mexico is probably real tiny right after the flood. This would be my theory, that the oceans filled in, and the reason we have a continental shelf is because of the ice caps melting back, which we'll get into in a minute.
How, Kent? What do you think existed in what is now the negative space past the continental rise before the flood? What was there? Because if it wasn't lower than the continental rise, then you can't get the continental rise to be there as a result of erosion. It hurts my brain so much. I'm taking a drink. Okay. I'm actually getting a headache right now. I can feel behind my left eye starting to pulse. Yep. It's a real thing. I'm currently trying to push my eyeball back in because it feels like it's going to pop out.
That's not good.
No, I mean, it's not going to actually pop out, but it feels like it, and it feels nice to push my eyeball back in. Well, it doesn't feel nice. It just feels less bad. Oh, wait, hold on. Lubalar says, wait till Kent learns about massive underwater canyon in Iceland that exists in the European and North American plates moving apart. Yeah, see, that's the continental rift, and he does know about it. But for some reason, he seems to think that that's where the flood started. Like, water poured out of that, even though we know it's a volcano, and therefore no water ever poured out of it. Morgan Bory says, I have Sheepit running for you more often than not when I'm home because of the free electricity. Awesome. DM Evolutionary News Media Wing says, did you explain how underwater rivers work? So the basic idea is that saltier water is denser because it has dissolved salt in it. And so it will sink down, and if it is on any kind of incline, then the salty water will start to flow under. And if there's enough salinity difference, the amount or the rate of diffusion of the salt is insufficient to actually erase that flow of water. And so it stays as a coherent channel of water within the wider ocean that is of higher salinity, and it can cause erosional features underwater because it really is an underwater river. Interestingly enough, if you've ever played Subnautica, if you've ever beat Subnautica, there's a biome called the Lost River. It's like the second to last biome you have to go to beat the game. And in it, it has areas that, unless you have the right protective equipment, will damage you as a result of their excess salinity. And it is like it's a little river under the ocean in Subnautica. And that's actually based on this phenomenon of actual underwater rivers. And so it's a little area where Subnautica is surprisingly scientifically accurate. I mean, within reason, right? It still also has biomechanical, like, underwater praying mantis monsters that can teleport you. So, like, not that scientific. But still, the river part, having an underwater river, that is scientific. So, shout out to Subnautica, one of my favorite survival games of all time. Unfortunately, it's one of those games that's really hard to replay because once you know where everything is, there's not, like, the point of it is the exploration. After you beat the game, what else is there to explore? Which is why, after I beat it once, the only reason I ever started up another game was to get that one last achievement that I didn't have. And so I think it's like one of 2 games I have 100% on. The other one is Satisfactory. So I have 100%, if I remember correctly, on Subnautica and Satisfactory. Basically it. I looked at the Space Marine 2 achievements. I was like, maybe I want 100% this. And I looked at them and I was like, no, I don't. I just don't. Same thing with Factorio. There are achievements I just don't ever want to bother with. Like place down a train within the first whatever minutes, or like only ever handcraft a certain tiny number of components. Like, no, I'm just not gonna. Don't wanna. Lieutenant Matt the Navigator for $5 says, I'm pretty sure that Kent has never heard the term cryovolcano because he still goes on about magic comets, not that it would actually help him. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure he's never heard of a cryovolcano. Actually, you're my proxy for like things people know about. Do you know what a cryovolcano is?
It's a volcano that shoots out ice or water.
All right. Yeah. And it's found on Earth?
On some moons in the solar system.
All right. Cool.
Not on Earth.
Morgan Pori says, Dapper being a gamer. Good job. Look, video games are one of my big recreational activities. It's doing art, video games, and doing TTRPGs, whether it be prep or actual play. Those are my big 3 like recreational activities. So if you find me on one of my weekend days, which are Sunday and Monday, there's a very good chance I'm either going to be making art on Blender, reading a TTRPG book, playing a TTRPG, or playing a video game. And right now I am doing a new run of Planet Crafter because they had their moons update, where you can now fly to different planets and terraform them, and there's like a system-wide terraformation index thing. I have a lot of fun with that. Although I did the hardest start in the game, where you start on a tiny little moon that has no renewable resources past like tier 1, which is, you gotta be careful. You have to deconstruct a lot of your previous stuff in order to make new stuff, because you really have to conserve on things like, especially aluminum. Olivia Williams for 2B Robux says, talking of survival games, Dune Awakening is great. You know, I saw some gameplay from that earlier, but it was, Bent was watching it, and Bent doesn't know anything about Dune. So I'd say things like, hey, how close are they to Arakeen? And he's like, I don't know what that is.
I don't know.
I'm like, well, are they wearing a still suit? He's like, I don't know what that is, but they're not standing still. I was like, no, it's like a still, like, used to condense. He's like, I don't know. And then he's like, I think she's drinking blood, and I'm like, I think it's more that she's taking all the water out of enemies.
The water from the blood.
Yeah, not just the blood in particular. And like, so it was very hard to figure out what was going on because that was the only gameplay I've seen. And sorry, but Ben, you need to know more about Dune.
I'm sorry.
It's got magic spice.
Sounds great.
Yeah. You should want. Have you not seen Dune? Like any of the Dune adaptations?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I don't recommend starting with the sci-fi miniseries.
Okay.
But the recent 2 movies were really good. And if you're in a Lynchian mood, which I don't know if you ever are, but if you are, you could watch the David Lynch adaptation, in which Sting appears in a very skimpy Speedo, if that's your thing.
Sting the wrestler or the musician?
The musician.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I just assume that you have like visions in your head of a Speedo-clad thing.
I don't think about Sting too often.
Well, you would if you had seen the David Lynch Dune.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Jillian says, hot take, the David Lynch Dune is better than the Villeneuve. I mean, look, I think that's a valid take, but I don't think that that's a take that Bent would agree with, because I know enough about Bent to know that I think he would prefer the Villeneuve Dune to the David Lynch Dune.
Anything's possible.
How much do you like it when a woman just stares blankly at the camera and in a deadpan tone gives you like a 10-minute overview of the setting?
Yeah, that doesn't sound very fun.
Yeah, so you might like the Villeneuve one better.
All right.
David Lynch is great, and it's one of his least Lynchian movies, but also David Lynch is kind of a vibe, and if you're not vibing with the vibe, you're probably not going to be into David Lynch, right? Like, there's a lot of people that I would not introduce Eraserhead to. Although, did you know that David Lynch said that Eraserhead was his most spiritual movie?
I did not know that.
Yeah, and when the interviewer asked him to elaborate on that, his response was, no. Which I think is an amazing response.
Nice.
Rest in peace, David Lynch.
So you can see where New Orleans is there. South of there, you can see the Gulf of Mexico has what's called the Mississippi Cone. There's enormous amounts of mud being washed out there all the time.
Yeah, it's building up, though, Ken. Sediment building up. That's the opposite of erosion. Are you going to talk about that? Oh.
About 80,000 tons an hour washing into the Gulf of Mexico from the Mississippi River.
That's a lot. Is it really 80,000 tons an hour? Could someone check on that? Because I don't know. And I mean, I know the Mississippi brings in a lot of sediment, but like that's a huge amount. It would be interesting to see if that's true. But I just have no idea, right? Like if you just came out of the blue and were like, "Hey Dapper, how much sediment does the Mississippi River deposit into the Gulf of Mexico per hour?" I wouldn't have an answer for it.
Well, of course, we covered in seminar part 1 how that this is an indication that the Earth is not billions of years old, because the Gulf of Mexico would have been full of mud. If you ask evolutionists, you know, they'll say, well, there was an ice age 35,000 years ago, and there was another one 100,000 years ago, and they've got like 6 or 8 ice ages. They argue about the number. Ask them, how do you know there was an ice age?
Actually, they don't argue about the number of ice ages, but these are called glacial periods or glacial maxima, right? They're all part of the same ice age that he's talking about. But there has been more than one ice age. It's just that they were generally separated by hundreds of millions of years, not by tens of thousands of years. So an ice age is any time that the Earth goes through an entire year and not all of the ice at the polar ice caps melts, right? If there's year-round ice, it's an ice age, which means we're currently in an ice age. Earth has spent most of its time not in ice ages, but it has had a few. Roshina, the Facticity of Cheese Caliber 199 says, the one in which Kent looks at maps incorrectly. Kent the Bacteria kind of Halstead for 499 says, the Gulf of what now? Look, this was before Kent would have had any reason to start calling that the Gulf of America. And I'll tell you what, I will be dead in the cold ground before I ever recognize the Gulf of America. Or Arkansas.
Age 80,000 years ago and 30,000 years ago. How did you pick these numbers?
A lot of it is ice core dating. That's a big part of it, right? You can dig down and you can do things like you can actually carbon-14 test some of the air, right? Because air has carbon in there. You can also count ice layers, and you can see how thick they are. Thicker ice layers are going to indicate larger amounts of ice deposition, which usually is going to correspond to more glaciation, right? Colder is going to be more snow for a longer part of the year. There's also things like we can count up how many terminal and lateral moraines we can see, because when there's a glacial maximum, it's rarely at the exact same level as before. So because we can see multiple instances of terminal and lateral moraines, something Kent does know about, we can count those up. That doesn't make it super easy to date, but we can still do that. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do that can help us figure that out. We can also use other signals like pollen signals and things like that in ice cores to give us a proxy for the actual climate. So we can say that even though there's been ice in these areas in like, inland Greenland where we take these ice cores, not near the coast where it snows too much and too rapidly and there's too much temperature fluctuations, but really deep inland. And we can do things like check pollen samples to see whether or not there was a lot of pollen nearby. Because if there's a lot of pollen nearby, since plants generally can't grow on ice, that means that there was probably less glaciation at that period. Whereas if there's relatively low amounts of pollen in summer ice deposits in these ice cores, then that probably means that there's not a lot of plants which we can then have as a proxy for, probably a lot of ice. So it's a confluence of a bunch of different kinds of evidence that all come together to tell us when there were glacial maxima, when there were glacial retreats and minima, and we can construct this. And so it is complex, but like paleoclimatology is a real thing, and it does have data, and you can learn how to interpret it. Now, it's going to take you years of training to do that at an expert level, which Kent doesn't have. So it's not surprising that Kent doesn't know how it works, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't work, because remember, reality is under no obligation to make sense to Kent Hovind. Lieutenant Matt the Navigator for $5 says, counting the ice layers is giving Kent too much credit, the counting bit, not the coring. The thing is, Kent actually claims to have been to a location where they did ice core dating. And I don't know why he was there, or if he was there, or what the deal is, but that seems to have left no impression on him, other than that it was cold. Because he talked about how he had to put on a big puffy jacket to go in there because it was so cold in the freezer. Which, like, okay. Cool. Which actually reminds me, I really hate that a bunch of data storage places are coming up in Arizona, in like the Valley of the Sun, like the hottest parts of like the inhabited United States, and like it's because data centers already use up so much damn water, and I don't know if you know, but Arizona is basically always lurching from one water crisis to another because it's Arizona and also climate change. And also because the water treaty surrounding the states that use the Colorado River was based on a set volume for the Colorado River, which means that total, all of the states that are part of that water treaty are actually owed more water when added up. That is available from the Colorado River. So, like, it's a whole bunch of nonsense. And then a bunch of tech companies were like, that's where we should put water-hungry data centers. Like, please don't, but they're doing it anyway, and I kind of hate it. Especially since year on year, Arizona farmers tend to get lower and lower amounts of water allocated to them, which is, great, because if there's one thing I think we need more of, it's random AI bullshit. And if there's one thing I need less of, it's fruits and vegetables, I guess. And we don't need that.
They picked those numbers from factors like this. For instance, the erosion rate of Niagara Falls caused them to pick the number for, 30,000 years ago for an ice age.
What? How would you get from the erosion rate of Niagara Falls? How would anyone even try to get from the erosion rate of Niagara Falls to when there was an ice age?
Yeah, that makes no sense to me.
I'm taking a drink. Okay, whatever.
And the filling in of the Gulf of Mexico would cause them to pick the number to say, oh, well, that was because 100,000 years ago there was a...
Again, what are we talking about? There's no reason to think either of these numbers have been constant, and geologists know that. So no. No. I'm taking another drink. No one just looked at the volume of sediment in the Gulf of Mexico from the Mississippi River and was like, Ice Age, 100,000 years ago.
Another ice age. That's why they're getting those numbers, is from these features. When I was in Fairhope, Alabama, which is right on the Pensacola side of Mobile Bay, I asked some of the folks there, I said, how deep is the bay out there? Because there were some people out there going...
Robert Edson says, Basilisk is prioritizing data centers over food for humans. That tracks. Okay. You got me there. Maybe that explains it. It's all Rocco's Basilisk. I love Rocco's Basilisk. It's a bunch of tech billionaires. Or, well, not all billionaires, but a bunch of tech bros saying, hey, what if someday a boot exists that's so big that we have to lick it now in the past before it even exists in the future? Like, yeah, what if? That's sure is a hypothesis there that you got. Yep.
Going out in boats. They said, well, about the deepest place is about 7 feet. I mean, all the way across that huge body of water, 7 feet deep, This.
What is it about shallow bodies of water that fascinates Kent so much?
It's a good question.
Because, like, Kent is the one who incorrectly says that if you spread out a drop of water, you could cover the whole Earth. So, like, clearly he understands that bodies of water can be shallow, because that's as shallow as a body of water could be, right? It's like a monomolecular layer. So, like, I just don't get it. There must be something that, like, tickles his brain in some unusual way about the idea of a volume of water that is extensive in 2 dimensions, but not very extensive in one of the other dimensions. It's really weird. I don't get it.
Me either.
I'm trying to think, like, what could possibly fascinate someone so much about the idea that a body of water might have a large surface area and a small depth. If anyone has any ideas, tag me, because I'm at a loss.
It's deep. When they have a hurricane, 2 things happen in a hurricane. There can be a tidal surge where the wind is blowing one direction so much it pushes the whole water pushes up. If we got
See, water isn't flat. Take that, Flurfs. For $2, Lieutenant Math Navigator says he's pining for the fjords. Well, I mean, he's not a parrot. We all know parrots are the ones who pine for the fjords. Wait, Ben, do you know about that?
No, I didn't know that.
Oh. I feel like you haven't seen as much Monty Python as maybe you should have.
I've seen very little Monty Python, but not zero.
Well, you should watch some of the Monty Python's Flying. Some good stuff in there.
Okay.
Like Olympic wife swapping. Let's see. Sanguine Sonder, who's been a member for 10 months and is at the tetrapod level, says Kent would love the Pure Lake. Do I know what the Pure Lake? I mean, I'm assuming it's a very shallow lake. Do I know that one? And do you recognize that one?
Nope. Do not.
Oh, it's from the Stormlight Archives. Okay, it's a shallow inland lake in central Roshar. It has been so long since I've read any of the Stormlight Archive books, so sorry about that. Yeah. I mean, they're good books, don't get me wrong. I like Brian Sanderson's work, but, like, I don't know. I just kind of fell off and forgot to ever jump back on that bandwagon. So, I do appreciate the reference, though, to Stormlight Archives. It's good stuff. You ever read any of those, Bent?
I haven't.
They're pretty good. It's a series of fantasy novels, and Brian Sanderson has this whole, like multiverse fantasy setting called the Cosmere, and there's, like, a unifying, overarching, like, magic system, but it manifests in different ways on different planets. And yeah, it definitely doesn't have a lot of the standard fantasy tropes that you might expect. Like, there's no orcs or elves or goblins, but it's pretty good stuff. If you like fantasy and you like interconnected worlds and a lot of world building, I would recommend that you check out some of the Cosmere novels. I have not read all of them, but no spoilers, he says, for many books that are decades old at this point, I think.
a big pan of water and blew real hard on one end, we could blow all the water up and make it sloped just from the air pressure. Hurricanes do that. They push water in. It can come up 15 feet or 30 feet even in a tidal surge. But before that happens, if the wind is blowing offshore, you have the opposite effect. There have been several times when Mobile Bay was empty. There was no water in it.
I'm really hoping he gets to a point about the whole hurricane thing.
Got to figure what they call it. It's not a tidal surge. It's the opposite of a tidal surge, but there's probably a name for it. Same thing with Pensacola Bay. Very, very shallow. Lake Okeechobee down in South Florida. You can see that dot, that huge blue dot there in the central part of South Florida. It's only 6 feet deep. Giant lake. Very, very shallow. So,
yeah, so what, Kent? What is the point of you talking about this? What about, like, standard geology do you think predicts only deep lakes? Or what about the flood do you think causes shallow bodies of water in some place? Like, what is the point that you're trying to make? Are you just fascinated by shallow bodies of water? do you just kind of think they're cool? Because, like, okay, fine if you do, but, like, why? Admiral Snappy Turtle, who's been a member for 3 months and is at the Amnio level, says, going to use my milestones to say beep boop for RachBot and her mini-bot. Hope that 2 of you are enjoy the Dapper stream, and 7 of 12 is awesome with a Godzilla, and 7 of 12 is awesome. So in case you guys don't know, 7 of 12 is a character in the Star Trek Adventures game that we have, that you saw the trailer for earlier. He is played by Craig McNeil, and he is a ex-Borg Klingon security officer on the USS Kongzi. Becca Chesiniano, who's been a member for 19 months, who's at the tetrapod level, says, Kent is searching for an excuse for the flood. Yeah, but how does a shallow bay get him that? Like, I normally can kind of figure out where Kent is trying to go. Like, it kind of works out. But I just have no idea where he's trying to go with, like, shallow bodies of water exist. Which, like, yeah, that's true. You're not wrong about that fact. But, like, and?
It's a little deceptive to look at maps and say, because it's blue, it's water, therefore it's all the same. No, it's...
No one thinks that, Kent. That's not a thing that people are confused about, broadly speaking. Like, sure, maybe there's some, like, flat earthers or young earth creationists who are confused, I guess, because, like, you gotta be pretty stupid to be one of those. But, like, this is not a widespread confusion that people have, that the blue on the map is all going to be the same. I'm taking a drink for this. Let's see. Lieutenant Math Navigator for $5 says, Kent likes bodies of water as deep as his knowledge base. Oh. Sadly, that might be the best possibility I've heard. Let's see. DM says, he's going to say, anyway, who cares? Yeah, maybe. He does do that a lot, when he goes off on a completely irrelevant tangent where he's still being stupid, but then he'll say, yeah, anyway, who cares? Which usually I agree with him on. Yeah, who does care? Why is this something that we care about?
They're definitely not all the same. So, why do we have a continental shelf? How did the oceans fill in? Where did all this extra water come from? We're going to cover that here tonight on more about this flood.
Dutch the Place of Hostility's Tunicate for $2 says, it's amazing Kent has lived so long, sans brain. And it really is. Like, I can't imagine trying to navigate the world being as dumb as Kent Hovind. Like, I just don't get it. I guess he's riding on his charisma, but, like, I don't think he has that much, but he must, right? Like, he runs a cult. You can't run a cult if you're too uncharismatic. It's not going to work. So I don't know. It's baffling to me. Yeah, the Bacterial Halstead said he would love the lakes and ponds in Elden Ring. That's true. Like, all of Liurnia is just one, like, ankle-deep lake. Not all of it, obviously, but, like, centrally Liurnia. Yeah, maybe he would. I gotta say, I do appreciate the degree to which Elden Ring scaled back on how much time you have to spend in poison swamps compared to other FromSoft Souls-like games, because I know that Miyazaki is a huge fan of the Poison Swamp, but I am not a huge fan of the Poison Swamp. It's always my least favorite part of, like, a Dark Souls 3 run, is getting to, like, the Poison Swamp. Because, like, I don't want to be punished for just being in the location. I want to be punished for being bad at combat. But Poison Swamps, it's like, no, screw you. You are in the location you're required to be, and now you're being punished for it. Like, I don't want to be punished for just existing in the location that the game forces me to be in. So it's my least favorite part of Dark Souls, is Poison Swamps. And there are fewer Poison Swamps. I don't think any of the Poison Swamps are mandatory to beat Elden Ring. I don't think so. Pretty sure you can complete an Elden Ring run without ever going into a Poison Swamp. If I'm wrong about that, let me know, and let me know which Poison Swamp you have to go into, but I don't think that you do. Roshana, the Facticity of Cheese Keller for $4.99 says, I need cheesy rice, which is also how I imagine the texture of Kent's brain. Gross. But also, yeah, cheesy rice is pretty good. Yeah. Make a nice queso sauce, stir it into some cheese. Hard to beat. Scarlet Rot Lake. Yeah, but do you actually have to go into the into the actual like swamp of Aeonia to beat the game? Because I don't think so. Because like, what's in the what's in the lake of Aeonia? Like, you've got, if you want to was it farm clean rot night gear? Sure, but you don't have to. If you want to defeat Commander Nile or whatever, but again, you don't have to. I don't think you actually have to go into the lake, the swamp of Aeonia for anything. Like, they're required to beat the game. Because, I mean, you can get to General Radon without ever stepping foot in any of the Scarlet Rot Lakes, as far as I remember. And, like, there's the other Scarlet Rot Lake down if you're trying to get to Melania. But again, Melania is an optional boss anyway. In fact, if you aren't very careful, you could miss Melania and the entire, like, Michaelis Hallig tree in a run. Because you don't have to go to anywhere near there if you don't want to. So I don't think there's a mandatory Scarlet Rot Lake. Which would count as a poison lake in my mind. Even though it doesn't inflict poison, it inflicts Scarlet Rot. I don't care, it's still a dot that it inflicts.
In what I call the Hoven theory, so nobody else has to take the blame for this. The ice caps would be huge for several hundred years right after the flood.
Why? I hope he's going to tell us why.
Then they would slowly melt back. There have been cases where they've seen icebergs, break off, then float around for 5 years before
That doesn't sound completely impossible.
they melt. There's been serious consideration of getting icebergs and dragging them down to water Sahara Desert.
Who has seriously considered this, Kent? I would like to know. Because that sounds really kind of dumb. And, like, it would cost way too much money. And, like, how would you even lift the icebergs over? And then that's a temporary solution, right? That's going to just wet the desert for a little while. It's not going to cause a climate shift in the desert. You're not going to change the weather patterns in the Sahara that way. I want to know who did this.
The problem is the cost of dragging it down there.
Well, if you can figure that one out, Ken, I'll give you that. We'll take a drink.
Take an awfully big boat and a whole crew of guys and a lot of gasoline, and it's just not worth it. It's cheaper to go raise your crops somewhere else currently. But if the price of food quadrupled, people might look at that a little more seriously. Well, now it's feasible to do. The flood is right here on this timeline. Noah's son Shem, born about 100 years before the flood. After the flood, had a son named and he named him Arphaxad. Arphaxad begat Selah. Selah begat Eber. Notice all of these guys are living over 400 years.
Well, I mean, none of these guys are likely to have existed in history, and so their ages are just, made up. But yeah, I do notice that that's the case.
Then you get to Peleg, and he only lives 239.
Oh no.
What happened in the days of Peleg, anyway?
I don't know, but apparently it didn't affect Eber because he lived almost twice as long past Peleg, according to this chart. So, yeah. And also, so in Peleg is you get him in, I think, Genesis 10, if I remember correctly. It might have been, I don't remember exactly, right? But it's after the flood narrative, which is like Genesis 7. And I believe it's after the Tower of Babel narrative. And it says that he was named Peleg, for in his day the land was divided. And Peleg comes from a root that, if you check back etymologically and see where it comes from, it's ultimately a verbal root that in Semitic languages means something like to dig a furrow, right? And then in different languages, it takes on different meanings. In Hebrew, it kind of means to separate things. Sometimes by digging a furrow, but not always. And in other Semitic languages, it takes on meanings like, I think in some cases like irrigation canal, because that's a furrow that you dig out and then water fills it. And so it takes on some other meanings in different Semitic languages. But it seems to fundamentally have something to do with marking out some kind of boundary by digging a line. And so this genealogy is also closely connected to the section in Genesis called Table of Nations, which spells out 70 nations that are the inheritance of the sons of God. And the part of that 70 nations that is, Adonai's portion is Israel. And so it's giving you the sort of mytho-historical origin of all of these nations that are surrounding Israel. Because all of them are sort of, in the region around Israel. So, like, it includes, like, what's now Ethiopia, Egypt, parts of Anatolia, maybe as far north as Greece, and then to the east, like getting into like Edomites, Moabites, various other sort of Mesopotamian groups and stuff like that, right? And so it seems like what's probably going on is that the division is the division of the nations out of the Tower of Babel after God confuses their languages. And then this list of 70 nations is supposed to correspond to the 70 sons of God that are each given dominion over the territory of one of these nations. One of these gods given the territory being the God of Israel. And then, so what's probably being stated is Pelleg was born around the time of this division into separate nations as a result of Babel. But because that's not super clear, and there's multiple literary layers being layered on top of each other here, it opens itself up to a lot of like weird conspiracy nonsense. In the same way that Kent is like, oh, it says that Job lived in the East. Probably China. Like, okay, sure, I guess you can make that up. Let's see what Kent has to say about Peleg.
Something changed on the earth. So, here's my theory. During the last few months of the flood, the unstable plates of the earth, which had been fractured, would shift.
Okay.
I mean, if the earth's crust was cracked up like an eggshell, and these pieces are floating around, someplace tilts up or tilts down or slips up and down, if the thin spots sank down, the water would rush down to fill in the hole, causing Grand Canyon in a few hours on the way.
Okay, I'm going to take a drink. Grand Canyon absolutely cannot have been formed in a few hours. We know what rapid flowing water looks like. We have examples of it. My two favorite examples are the spillways in the northern hemisphere of Mars, that, like the southern extent of them, is sort of like the northeast section of Valles Marineris. Whereas if you go to the other side, you get into Labyrinthus Noctis, which is definitely not where the Star Dragon is hiding. Don't worry about it, everybody. But north of that area, you can see these giant spillways where there's these teardrop-shaped like islands that form around craters because the compressed rock from the impact is harder. And so it forces this little teardrop shape. You can see these big, sweeping, but smooth-sided channels. And you can also see similar things in Washington and Oregon as a result of like the channeled cablands, which is another result of gigantic flooding. And it doesn't look like a canyon. It does not look like the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is full of sheer-sided walls, sharp barbs, switchbacks, meanders, all of which require slow-moving water to establish. Now, the initial channel that eventually became the Grand Canyon may in fact have been started by a flood. That's an actual real hypothesis about how the Grand Canyon got started. But we know for a fact that the majority of the canyon cannot have been formed as a result of flood runoff. It's physically impossible. So, no. That's not what happened.
Or a few weeks at the most. And also, the other part that lifted up would become the mountain range. Thin spots sink down. Other places lift up, like a waterbed. You push down somewhere, someplace else goes up.
Yeah, except that that's not how Earth works. Right? Because the mantle isn't actually a liquid. It can flow over very long periods of time, but it has such a high viscosity that under most circumstances, it's much more like a solid than it is like a liquid. So no, that's not how this works. There's not this hydrostatic equilibrium on the mantle, right? Some parts can push up, and that doesn't require another part of the crust to sink down. Or at least not part of the part that, like the continental crust that's rising up, right? And also, as some parts sink down, that usually corresponds to new crust forming elsewhere. Lieutenant Matt the Navigator for $5 says, Valles Marineris, not to be confused with Valles Marineris. Valles Marineris. I feel dumb today. I'm sorry. Carrie Bronson for $2 says Grand Canyon carved by interplanetary lightning. Okay, so that is that actual thing that like some of the Electric Universe people think, and basically their entire reason for thinking this is that it looks like a Lichtenberg figure, if I remember what it's called correctly, which is what happens basically when electricity burns through some kind of substrate, as in marinara sauce. Marinara is. I probably should have read it. Vallis marinara is. Yeah, I'm sorry. I am dumb today. Look, my brain is a little fried today. I had to do a lot of editing, and it's means I have to listen to myself a lot, and I kind of don't like doing that. I had to listen to stupid creations a lot. So yeah, I'm sorry. My brain is not making all the connections today. I even screwed up a freaking Stormlight Chronicles reference, which I feel bad about. Anyway, so yeah, so when electricity burns through some substance, right, it creates these branching, barbed, almost fractally complex patterns, and that's because just like water, electricity also follows the path of least resistance. And if the path of least resistance through a complex substrate involves lots of little meanders and fractally complex patterns, just like it does for water under various substrates and various like elevation gradients and whatnot, you will get a similar kind of pattern. Because in both cases, you're seeing flow of whatever is causing this. Electrons in one case, water molecules in the other, both going through the path of least resistance, which is very complex because of the complex substrate. And so you get similar figures. But that's because there are similar physics going in terms of the path of least resistance. But they're still fundamentally different processes. And if the Grand Canyon were carved by lightning, we could tell, because you can tell when lightning hits rock. You could see things like fulgurite, which is a kind of rock that forms when lightning hits things like sand, right? Forms fulgurite. You would see things like charring on rocks. We don't see that. Like, you can tell when rocks have been heated to very high temperatures, which lightning does. We don't see that. So, yeah.
Or a water balloon. The runoff would cause huge canyons.
No, it wouldn't. It would cause huge channels, and there's a difference, right? You would get smooth-sided channels with any feature that the channel couldn't erode away, ending up looking sort of like a teardrop shape, not just round, or jagged for that matter. And you would generally get very straight channels, not big meanders like you get in the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon has a switchback in it. Water flows in one way and flows out the exact opposite way. That's not something you get in a flood. Floods don't like to make turns, never mind 180-degree turns.
In a hurry. The Earth today is almost perfectly smooth for its size.
That's true. Take a drink. The Earth is much smoother than a cue ball.
The Earth, they say,
It's almost as smooth as Kent's brain.
the biggest mountain we know of is Mount Everest, 5 miles tall.
Yeah, it goes back and forth between that one and, like, what is it, K2 or whatever, but sure, whatever. Oh, hey, he actually made the same point I did. Cue balls have bigger pumps than that. I'm going to take that as a confirmed prediction. I'm taking a drink. Cool.
Well, on an 8,000-mile Earth, that's 0.0625%.
Oh, Jillian points out correct thing. It's the wrong its. The Earth is almost perfectly smooth for it is size. Yeah, nope.
Whoops.
Cue balls have bumps bigger than that. If you shrank the Earth down to the size of a cue ball, it would be smoother and rounder than the cue ball.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Even though Earth has these giant mountains, they're insignificant compared to the size of the Earth. At this distance, you can't even find Mount Everest.
Okay, but that's because it's hidden by the Earth. I know where it is, right? Like, it's over in the top right, and it's behind the curve of the Earth, Kent. Like, what? I'm gonna take a drink. This is... My goodness. Hey, Bent, how come I can't see the back of your head? It must not
Because-
exist.
Yeah, exactly. It's not there. That's why.
Okay. We're gonna do a poll. We're almost done with this, but we're gonna do a quick poll. So, does Kent have object? Oh, by the way, I'm using a new keyboard. This keyboard was actually gifted to me a while back on my what's it? From my wish list. And basically it was on there in case I needed a backup keyboard. Because another thing that my wish list is it's basically where I put things that I might want to buy at some point, but if someone else buys them for me first, well, that's great. And that's what happened with this. And then, like 2 days ago, my W key died as I was playing a game where W is forward. I was like, why isn't this working? And so I switched. I was like, maybe it's the game, right? So I switched to a different window, one where I could type, and tried typing in W, and it was only working like every 5th time or so. I was like, oh, that's bad. So now I'm on my backup keyboard, and I only have one more backup keyboard. It was the one I didn't know I was getting when I bought this computer. It came with a mouse and keyboard, and I was like, oh, okay, thanks, I guess. So we're gonna get a little tiny bit more Kent in, and then we're just gonna close this up.
Or the Rocky Mountains. You couldn't find them.
Once again, Kent, they're on the back of the globe. Just Kent apparently has the 3D reasoning capability of like a flat earther. Oh my goodness. All right. So let's see how the poll is doing. We only got 26 votes, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave this open while I go through a few things about what's coming up on the channel and whatnot. And then we will end it as sort of our last thing. So get your votes in now. Does Kent have object permits? Does he understand that things that he can't see still exist? Would he fall for peekaboo? If someone covered his eyes and uncovered them and says, peekaboo, would he be surprised because that person ceased to exist and now exists again? I don't know. Maybe. I don't think so, though. Anyway, Ben, do you have anything you want to tell people about this might be coming up for you?
I just have my Amazon wish list. That's it.
Fair
That's
enough. And hey, guys, other than you guys getting him pizza, the wish list is the only way that Ben gets food. So, like, you know,
It's true.
if you don't want Ben to starve, and we haven't got Ben gets free pizza, you could always wander over there and get him some, like, protein chips or something.
I'm very hungry.
Mm-hmm. Constantly. He's always complaining. He's
All
like,
the time.
I might starve. And I'm like, shut up and curl up on the couch. Keep your metabolism low.
Got it.
Eaten in 3 days. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do about it? And I mean, I guess the answer is I could give him some food, but I don't want it. All right, so what is coming up here on the channel? So on Thursday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, we have Don't Believe This Lie. Joel Weineweber answers in Genesis. I can't talk to. I'm out of it today. That's part 1. So Joel Weineweber is an artist that works at AIG, and he's going to be giving a talk all about how birds aren't dinosaurs, and he is basing this on fossils and being dumb and or dishonest. It's hard to say. So if you like me ranting about why creationists are really bad at dinosaurs, that is going to be a show you don't want to miss. So yeah, that's going to be on June 19th, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Then on Friday, I'm going to be doing episode 8 of season 1 of Star Trek Adventures. It's going to be Fading Suns, I believe is the title of it. And it's going to be... I mean, you saw the trailer for it, so that's the plan. There's going to be a space station that the crew visits, and things aren't going to go according to plan, because if they went according to plan, what would be the point of the episode, right? We only jump in when things aren't going to go according to plan. So that will be at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, so tune in over on Top Hats Off for that. It's a lot of fun. Then on Saturday, I'm going to be doing the next of the Billy Carson episodes with Kip and Vishanti. That is the Airbolt Habits of Thoth. are not ancient. Dapper reacts 124. So that'll be a pretty good time. I think Kip and Vishanti are definitely a good duo for my Dapper React stuff. And Kip was getting a little sad because we had finished what had become part of his Saturday routine, which was coming on Dapper Reacts to talk about Bodhi Hodge. And I was like, you know what? I won't cut Kip off. I will have something else that he is knowledgeable about, because he's knowledgeable about things like ancient Near East literature, which is a lot of the basis on which Billy Carson bases his absolute insane nonsense. Then next Tuesday should be Jackson with Jackson, although then again I said this one was supposed to be Matt with Matty, so like, who knows, but I'm going to check with Jackson and make sure that he is good for a Jackson with Jackson. I think he will be, he usually is. He's usually pretty reliable. Not too many, he doesn't flake out on me too much, so. And that is what is coming up in the next week or so, so let's end this poll. So the poll only lasted 5 minutes and only 30 people voted, but that's okay. So, does Kent have object permanence? No, 60%. Turtle, 36%. Yes, 3% out of 30 votes. So, yeah, I don't think Kent has a firm grasp on the fact that things that are not directly observed by him still exist. Which is weird because he believes in God, but I don't think he's ever directly observed God. So, like, I don't know how to square that circle. But I also don't have to. So, all right, hey, if you are interested, over on the Discord, we're going to be watching, I believe, episodes 13, 14, 15, and 16 of Power Rangers Beast Morphers Season 1. It is, in my opinion, one of the better seasons of Power Rangers. The costumes are interesting because they're big chains, they're not spandex, which isn't actually spandex, Dr. K, don't worry, I know. I think there's actually better acting, there are some actual character arcs going on, and so I actually think it's one of the higher quality seasons. So if that interests you, come hang out with us. We're going to watch, like we said, 4 episodes. And yeah, I hope to see all of you at the very least on Thursday for the next premiere. And stay safe out there. And remember, ICE is an existential threat and should be treated as such. Bye, everybody.
Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Ben Tovind, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Eleron Teller, Phil Rivara, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostek Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, Sphincter of Doom, Wallace, Max Cherry, North Texas Fossils, John Ackerman, and Tapioca Weasel. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.